triangles up with Facebook and.
Silent all around the line. If they get the chance, they were born in bloody circumstance. To go, leave me, run like you've never run before. Underground, given room to breathe, not puppy drowned. So die if you get the chance. Better men than you've been, let this dance. To go, leave me, run like you've never run before. Seen the worst, and there is nothing left for me to hate, so I can lay me down, my brothers, on the ground. I bled today until Coyote comes to raise me up and carries me.
I forgot to take the picture down again. We're here. We're just behind the picture.
Hey.
There we go.
Hey!
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Scottish Rugby podcast brought to you by the Scottish Rugby blog. I am Cammy Black. We are, for those watching live, we're slightly delayed tonight. I had to do a mine handover here with my wife because I've been sorting the kids out for bedtime. She said, I think one of them's got a temperature. And I said, "Oh, go and check." But then I remembered I'd washed his hair before bed, so it wasn't that he's sweating away at high temperature. So anyway, here we are. Hello. I'm joined this evening. We've got Ian here with us. Good evening, Ian.
Hello. Just switching off the Scotland Argentina rewatch there.
Just getting the analysis in.
Making the lighting consistent. Because obviously, for the podcast folks, the lighting around here is very important.
Very important. We've got Johnny McGinty. Good evening, Johnny.
Hello, good evening. That puts Ian on 1.5 more watches of Argentina than me. So,
and Craig Manson. Good evening, Craig.
Good evening. How are we doing?
So if you are, as Ian said, if you're watching us live, we're now on YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. You can also listen to us on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you can get your audio podcasts as well. You can also sign up to our Patreon, which is patreon.com/Scottish Rugby Podcast. And from £3 a month, you can get access to the bonus weekly podcast that we put out after the main one, where we sometimes go a little bit more in depth into the topics we've covered, and we also do our hands in the ruck as well, and sometimes have long, drawn-out conversations about 1980s and 1990s kids' cartoons.
Oh, that reminds me, I misled you slightly. It's the 10th of August, not the 7th, for the new season.
For Bluey, I'm really pleased.
72 hours more to wait.
We're on holiday that week, so I'm going to have to make sure I take the Fire Stick with me so I can watch it. Do you think they're going to do it like kind of they did with the Obi-Wan Kenobi thing, where it's like one episode a week of Bluey?
I hope not. Imagine how upsetting
really
that would
drag it out.
We've decided we're going to do a rewatch of all of them before it starts.
Oh, that's the way to do it.
Before the new series comes on.
I finished Obi-Wan yesterday.
It was excellent, wasn't it?
It's not as good as Bluey.
I don't know. I've still not watched it. I've still not seen Bluey. I know it's been praised to the hilt, but it's it's on my watch list.
Yeah, better than Obi-Wan Kenobi, but Obi-Wan Kenobi was better than a lot of the more recent Star Wars stuff. So swings and roundabouts. We might get it. Let's get into that in the Patreon pod. Ian, mine and Ian's views on Obi-Wan Kenobi. Anyway, we've got a bit to get through tonight. We are starting with it was kind of news that came out today about the Gloucester rugby player whose name escapes me because it's just fresh. It's Ed
Slater.
Ed Slater, who has been diagnosed with motor neuron disease, which comes back off the back of Ryan Jones, former Welsh international, saying that he has been diagnosed with early onset dementia. I think Ryan Jones only retired 2 or 3 seasons ago.
He's 42 years old, I believe.
Yeah.
And he played quite late. Didn't play he retired from Wales quite a long time ago, but he stayed in club rugby for a while.
So it's another I don't know, it's the Ed Slater one is, I guess, slightly different because there has been we've seen cases of motor neuron disease in rugby. We've got obviously Doddy Weir, and I don't think there is yet scientific evidence to suggest there's a direct link between motor neuron disease and head injuries or brain injuries, but there is an indication that that might actually be the case. There is evidence that CTE and early onset dementia is a result of rugby, but it's another kind of, I don't know, Johnny, another kind of nail in the coffin for rugby as we know it, I guess. And we've talked about this before on the podcast, and it kind of feels like we need to talk about it again. But we've seen some of the issues over the summer with high tackles and officiating, and it's not as much as some people would want to go away. It's not going to go away.
No. What there is now I need to try and get this right, and I'm probably not going to, but there is a couple of early studies that suggest that repeated concussive impacts can damage sort of tip of your spine, base of your brainstem, and that can be a contributing factor to motor neuron disease. Again, it's like a couple of studies that they're saying that this is a thing that might be a thing. So I don't think it's possible to say, oh, rugby players are getting more motor neuron disease because of this. But there certainly is a number of, or a handful of high-profile cases at the minute. And the last couple of weeks there have been some not great examples of how we're looking after head injuries, unfortunately, still. I think something needs to change.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, Craig, this isn't like, football, and they're saying all the guys that played in the 60s and 70s with the balls that weighed a ton are all getting concussion now, but actually, the balls are all lighter nowadays, and it's a bit different. These are guys that play effectively now, or have played very recently, when the concussion was taken much more seriously, and they had the protocols in place. Mm-hmm. So it's not that it's hard for the naysayers, I think, to say that, oh, this is an old issue and we've sorted everything now. because clearly the problem is very real and it's something that needs to be dealt with immediately.
Yeah, because we're still not dealing with it properly. We're sitting here discussing another dementia case that's linked with rugby, and another MND case that, I'm not going to say it's linked with rugby, but there's indicators there. And we're still saying that, still having an argument on Twitter, still having the referees having a discussion about Andrew Porter not getting a red card against with his hit against the big tall old black Brody Retallick. And we're saying that, he's a bigger lad that went against a smaller lad, so it's obviously he was giving way, so there's no problem with it, or it's a yellow card instead of red, and it's like, well, hang on a minute, the hit shattered his cheekbone, if I remember correctly, and he's out completely. That's a big hit. Nothing, so why are we having this discussion? We're trying to get people to tackle lower. We can't turn around and say to any of the coaches, well, you need to get them to tackle lower, but you know what? If they don't, it's okay. You'll get a yellow card, because you can use yellow cards tactically. So it's absolutely crazy. It needs to, and I don't want to hear about the game going soft, because we're now at this situation where people have been affected over many, many years, but these guys are playing now, and they're being influenced now, and we need to sort this out.
Go on then, yeah.
Right, what I find particularly ridiculous about the Porter citing decision is, like you said, he's a smaller man and he's absorbing the tackle. Well, surely it's a lot more difficult for a smaller man to break a taller man's cheekbone unless he's ridiculously high in his starting position, which he was. And there was this, like, one of the mitigating factors was, but he's just turned round. But Retallick wasn't dipping. Porter was far too high from his starting position. I think he had time to lower. I think he was too high to start with. You can then turn around and argue, we'll get the classic, but you've never had to make that split second decision on the pitch. Well, no, but they're paid to do that, and they have a duty of care to their fellow professionals, and I think he did have time to adjust. He did have time to get himself properly positionally set, and he's cracked Brody Retallick's cheek. What were you about to say, Cammy?
Well, I was going to say, I don't think this is in direct response to kind of concussion as such, but one of the proposals that seems to be bandied around World Rugby at the minute is to have centrally pooled employed referees, as though that's going to make a difference, because essentially we've got that in the URC, I suppose. They're essentially pooled to the unions. But I don't think professional refereeing helps to a degree, because they've got time to focus on the refereeing, but I don't think until player behaviour changes, you can't blame the referees, because the referees are only officiating what's in front of them. It's a coaching issue. And as you said, Craig, that people will play the system, because that's how rugby works. You play, you find the grey areas in the rules, which is part of why the game's so fascinating, because people do play around with the rules and try and bend them. But when it comes to head injuries, I think it's going to have to be something drastic done, and it's going to have to be around the height of the tackle, which they've tried to lower, but I don't think they've gone far enough. I think we're going to have to get to the point where you're going to have a line drawn across the kind of the chest area.
Remember, there was an American league that did that.
Yeah,
it was a really short-lived one. About the only good thing that it did was that every single kit had a line like nipple height, and it was marked on every single kit so that the referee could see it and go, "No, it's too high."
I think they.
The thing is,
like, sorry, I think they tried that in like a English Championship or even like the Anglo Welsh, and it didn't really work.
The thing is, though.
Sorry.
No, sorry, I interrupted you, mate.
Oh no, it was just like I was basically finished. I think what they said was they ended up with more concussions, and what they found was that a lot wasn't tackle height; it was
tackle technique, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was that in the
Yeah.
afters.
It's
a
the
lot
you
of-
smash. It's the because it's the concussions of the tackler where the tackler's smashing into someone's knee because they've got the head on the wrong side or they've thrown themselves directly at the knee rather than to the side.
Yeah, but this is a situation that I'm probably more angry about or grumpy. I wouldn't say I'm angry, but I'm grumpy about it. Is the fact that you've got Wayne Barnes there, who I thought made a very, very good decision. I think it was the semi-final where Don Brandt pushed Joe Marler into contact, and he reversed the penalty or he didn't give a yellow card or a red card because it was, his teammate was forcing him forward and putting more momentum into him. I felt, we should be cutting that out as well. But the bottom line is head-to-head where I was disappointed in Wayne Barnes is that there seems to be this shift of let's apologise to players for head-to-head contact and sending them off, and let's start and try and do everything they possibly can to bring it from a red down to a yellow, or from a yellow down to a penalty. Now that's fair enough. I don't have a problem with if someone is dipping, as in they've slipped on the floor, and someone has clashed heads accidentally. That's fine. But when you're looking at a tackle situation, and it is against the laws to be upright in a tackle, and you get a head-on-head contact, I don't care if it's the bigger man's coming towards you or a littler man's coming towards you. It is a red card, and you will cut that out because coaches are very, very smart and they will work around it.
The problem is, I think that at the moment it's not even just players. I think they're being coached to do that. Like Charlie Ewell's one in the Six Nations was a good example where England had obviously identified Ireland's ruck speed as something that they wanted to deal with, and they were sending somebody in to choke the ball and slow the ball down at every ruck. And Charlie Ewell's got sent off in the first minute for doing it. And until coaches aren't using that as a tactic, then there's going to keep being these collisions, and they just have to start consistently saying, if you have a collision like that, you're getting sent off, until coaches can't use that as a tactic anymore. They have to find another way to defend.
Well, you could get rid of the choke tackle altogether because that's part of the reason people are targeting the ball rather than the man. And I suppose it's you're trying to form a maul to then turn it into a scrum because the ball doesn't come out, aren't you? Or that the referee calls maul so that the other team can't then collapse it. But actually, if you just said you can only form a maul, say a line out, where it's because it's probably much more planned and safe to do so. You can't form if you tackle somebody, you have to go to ground. It would. I'm not saying it changes the dynamic of the game. It changes rugby as a sport a little bit, but it's the kind of things they're going to have to start looking at are more drastic measures to discourage players from targeting the ball.
I've always thought the main thing about the choke tackle is to try and stop the offload.
Yeah,
because you see someone like Leon Nakarawa running at you. Well, when he was at his peak, not now. He could probably barely run the length of himself in the air. But you can see the damage he can do. Just gets those big periscope arms up, because I suppose that was a style of play that we hadn't seen much in the once rugby turned professional in the Northern Hemisphere, and it all became grunt work. Essentially, we hadn't seen a lot of nice offloading for a while. So that was brought in to combat that. But I remember there was that one game where Mark Bennett literally got choked out in a choke tackle, and that shows the dangers of it. The whole thing is just it's a dangerous game, especially now that people are bigger. We're talking about people hitting each other like cars. And even I think, you've been saying about football, right? Fair enough, they were headering a much heavier ball, but what we have now is you've got guys hitting the ball a lot, like professional rugby. You've got guys who are proper professional athletes, not smoking Woodbines at halftime. And they are hitting the ball at like over 100 miles an hour. A David Beckham cross is probably going to come in at 65 mile an hour, and you're going to stick your head on that, and that's going to hurt. I've headed a few fast balls in my time, and fucking hell. Sometimes you're like, Jesus, that's a skull rattle.
Yeah.
19 minutes and 25 seconds.
Oh,
Cammy.
sorry, I forgot. Sorry, Cammy. Sorry, everyone.
That's all right.
It's all right. 12A, you're allowed one F-bomb, and it was used in an aggressive manner. So therefore, by BBFC rules, we're good.
It was fine in the context of what he was saying, I think, is what
Yeah.
BBFC would rule.
An effing.
I think the issue you have though is that we're talking about trying to prevent offloads, and people are saying, "Oh, it's just going to be terrible because the defences are going to become porous because everyone's just going to offload, and we've got to stop the offload." No, we don't. Everyone will.
How amazing would rugby be if everyone was offloading all the time?
Well, if you look at, and but we can still tackle against the offload. You can still stop the offload. You can still hit hard in the proper way.
And the thing is, the number of people who can successfully execute a one-handed offload or an offload off the deck or a cat flap offload or anything like that is significantly lower than the amount of people who think they can do it. Like, just because we stop high tackles doesn't mean that everyone's going to be offloaded all the time, because not everyone is Leone Nakarawa. Do you know what I mean? Like, for every one of him, there's going to be some like Northern Hemisphere prop who thinks they can do it and can't. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And also, the defensive line comes up fast outside the tackler, then it kind of cuts off the offload option anyway, because the only option you've got is to offload deep and hope they rush up too much and find a gap. But you can't. If you try and offload sideways, by the time you've been stopped, you've probably got a defender outside you anyway. So there's loads of ways you can stop it.
You also have to be aware, though, and this is where the difficulty comes in. You then have, if you don't sort this out at a professional level, you have amateur players and then junior players trying to do the same thing. And this is where the difficulty comes in, because we may be sitting here saying, we are sitting here saying it's a shame for these professional players that are going through this awful, awful time, and I really feel terrible for them and their families. But that we're then not talking about the amateurs that are going through similar things, that don't get the clubs supporting them, don't get the charities helping them out, etc., because they're not a known face, they're not known. And if you look at, for example, choke tackles and high tackles targeting the ball, how can I, as a coach of an under 18s group, say to them that we are, which I actually do, we are tackling correctly, we're going for a low tackle, we want to put them on the floor, and they're saying, but coach, when they're playing against us, they're trying to choke us because they're trying to hit the ball. They're tackling us high because they're trying to hit the ball. Because you need to cut it out with the other coaches as well. You can't just have, you can't just hope that amateur coaches are you're going to play on their moral standards, because sometimes that doesn't happen. Yeah. So you cut it out at professional level.
Yeah, Martin Bell makes a good point on our Patreon social media groups. So we've got a choice here: either we get serious or the courts will. I'm not convinced that some of the let the boys play community really understand the existential threat the sport is facing. And I suppose, Johnny, that's it, isn't it? That at the moment, rugby has a degree of choice in what it does next. There's been a lot of small, little, niggly choices, but they don't really feel like they've kept up or been enough or significant enough to kind of deal with the threat. And there is, we know there's a court case coming. There's a class action coming against World Rugby and a number of unions and clubs. And if, that may be successful, and if so, rugby can't cope with the settlement that NFL had to pay out.
Yeah, that's I watch a lot of NFL as well, so I know fine well that the NFL can and did absorb a multi-billion-dollar payout, and rugby cannot do that. Like, if the lawsuit in rugby goes the same way as the NFL one did, then rugby will no longer exist, because there isn't $3 billion around to pay off all these lawsuits. There's just not. So they absolutely cannot let it get that far. And so people who are saying, oh, but if we get serious on this and we stop all these tackles and we stop all this and we start dishing out red cards, then we might see the end of rugby, right? Okay, well, if you don't and you find yourself getting settled for $3 billion, you will see the end of rugby. There's no might about it. That's it. It cannot exist anymore.
Yeah, I also think, wasn't there evidence that I'm trying to Google it here while you were talking, Johnny? I think the Aussie rules. There was actually evidence that they were suppressing medical evidence when they do it. Oh yeah, we're looking into it. We're checking this out. We're taking concussion very seriously because Aussie rules is it's basically rugby with kickboxing in it. It's and I saw a wee bit of I saw the highlights of the State of Origin the other day, and within 5 minutes you've got like 3 guys half injured, like high shots. One of them was actually like, because they were so I think they were on 4th phase maybe, so they're trying to push him forward. They were so busy trying to clatter the guy who'd hurt the other guy, they've ended up kneeing their own player in the face. It was just chaos.
It just looks like violent net. Whenever I've watched it, it looks like violent netball. I've no idea what's happening, but it's fascinating nonetheless.
Like first
Violent
thing,
netball.
when I was in New Zealand, I mean, somebody said, "Oh, you should watch State of Origin, man. It's if you want to see rugby played like the hardest you've ever played it." And it was just really boring. I think it finished like 6-12.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, it's just people smashing into each other. This is just a demolition derby of Antipodeans. This is all this is.
I think there's been there's definitely a suggestion that one of the experts at World Rugby have used has been done for plagiarising his work.
Yeah, that was the AFL's guy.
Yeah, was that the same AFL guy?
He's basically been completely discredited.
Yeah, should have listened to Will Smith.
So that's a good indicator that we're not completely up the creek already. And this is the thing: it might be too late already because the class action suit's in, the action's being taken. It might be too late at this point to kind of protect rugby. We'll just have to see how it goes. But I think there's a massive PR issue here as well, because this is not back page news. This is, front page of the Guardian, rugby player has concussion. You don't get front page of the Guardian stories about, how well a rugby match has gone, but you do get articles about concussion, and you do get articles about motor neuron disease, and that's what rugby is a minority sport in Scotland. It's a minority sport in the rest of the UK, maybe not in Wales, but I think football's rapidly overtaking it. Maybe Ireland, maybe they've got their mad kind of variation of shinty or whatever they call it. Shinty light.
Hurling.
Yeah. But it's a minority sport in world sports, and what people see at the minute, if you're thinking, I might give rugby a go, is they've got massive problems with head injuries and people getting concussed. So yeah, it's not good.
And that it's still a posh boy sport as well.
Yeah.
People can pay for medical treatment.
Yeah, well, World Rugby have to. Well, I know how toothless World Rugby are, but rugby unions as a whole need to, in one foul swoop, need to sort this out quickly, because they'll have a huge drop off of player take up, and forget about player take up. They're going to have, as you just said, they're going to have multi-million-pound lawsuits coming their way, and they've got no way of stopping it.
Ed Slater is 33 years old, and today he's had to stop his professional career because that's absolutely tragic, man. I mean, that guy got a few England caps. He's a damn fine player, and he's 33, man. That's brutal.
Yeah,
and it's like, we don't know if it's like Johnny said. I mean, it's unlikely there's a link. It's not known if there's a link to playing rugby, but it's just one of the things again where brain injuries are occurring in rugby players. Doddy and Fernando Ricks and all that, and Yus van der Vestes, they've all gone recently. Young men.
Rod Burrow. You look at Rod Burrow as well. With Rugby League. I think MND's an issue. MND's been an issue with Rugby League players as well. So it's not. Yeah. We'll
get Al McDonald on.
Yeah,
These are-
we'll have Alan on again, and Alan can talk us through it.
And then
The thing is, though, that's the one
I'm
thing.
not a neurosurgeon. What are you asking me?
Well, the thing is, though, Alan McDonald's, in geriatric medicine, and it feels, but he knows all about this stuff because it should be something that hits people in later life, not at 33.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
the symptoms are early onset dementia.
Yeah.
Exactly. But then you can only check for it
Later,
for
exactly, and then you've got the CT, which
Yeah.
you can only check for when someone's died anyway. But it's all deeply
Alright.
worrying.
Elon Musk, on you go. Find out how we can find CTE without having someone die first.
That's it. That'd be more useful than putting a
That's
car in
about-
space.
pretending to buy Twitter.
You could buy this podcast.
You could Elon
Instead.
sponsor it.
Anyway, so the other thing I want to kind of talk about, and I've no neat segue into this, by the way. I was searching for one. I thought I don't think there's an appropriate one into what we're going to talk about next from head injuries. The sevens. Now, there's been a big announcement this week that and it has happened in previous years, but this is much more of a permanent change now. Is that Scotland, England, and Wales are withdrawing from the World Rugby Sevens series and creating a joint Team GB squad. Now, previously, what they would do is they would nominate England as the qualifying team for the Olympics. And then the year before the Olympics, Team GB would play some European circuits and then start the Olympics in order to then be ready for the Olympics. What they're saying now is in order to align with the Olympics, we're having a Team GB for the World Series and the Olympics. The individual unions will will explore opportunities for their sevens programs and will maintain sevens programs for the Commonwealth Games. Obviously, for Scotland, it's of slight concern for two reasons. One, I think, kind of from a historic point of view, we invented the sport, and we, to my mind, have squandered numerous opportunities to kind of use that and use the power of that to our advantage. But CSRU. The second thing is, it's a development pathway, and it always has been a development pathway within Scotland. And it's started to be a development pathway for Scotland women who have been doing very well in the European circuit, presumably with a view to getting into the World Series and competing there. So I don't know where this leaves us, Craig, because presumably the European circuit's where we're going to be looking to kind of have the Scotland Sevens programme with a view to being prepared for the Commonwealth Games once every 4 years. But I don't know that the European circuit provides the same level of competition and opportunities that kind of playing in the World Series does.
It's baffling to me why the SRU have let this go so easily. Now, maybe they've had a long fight and they've been fighting about it, but it's, again, with the SRU, there's been no talk about it. There's been no press releases or anything like that. So there was only one press release, and that is that we're joining the GB Sevens, and that's the way it is. George Horn, Pete Horn,
Darcy Graham,
Dougie Fife,
Nick Gregg, Kyle Stain.
Yeah, all through the sevens.
Ginger.
Lisa Thompson. We have
Watson even did a bit of sevens.
Yeah, it's a huge development. In fact, I would say the sevens program within the SRU has been responsible for bringing players on more than the academy system that has just now.
Yeah, we'd even used it as our capture team.
Yeah,
for a while.
Yeah,
and now all of a sudden it isn't.
So I think it's. I absolutely think it's a dire situation, and I think it needs to be sorted out as quick as we can because there's no, if you look at it, the only way I can see what's going to happen, we're going to go along to the Olympics. They'll get to the Olympics and then they'll disband the team again. And you've got all these, we've given up all these, all these development systems within the SRU sevens. We've laid off it a little bit because it's been looked after by GB sevens, and then all of a sudden they disband it and we're stuck again.
I think my worry is that it becomes a Lions problem, Johnny. That we've seen with Team GB that Scottish players have travelled and played well. I mean, Mark Bennett has got an Olympic silver medal. I think the last Olympics as well, they took a couple of Scottish players and they were playing regularly, but it depends how the selection is going to work, because you could have a Team GB with 0 Scottish players in it, because where are these players going to come from? Do you know what I mean? They're not. There's no pathway now for them, I guess.
No, and like the thing is that the way that it's worded and the way that it's structured, it seems like Team GB Sevens is going to exist to make a competitive Olympic Sevens team for the Olympic cycle, which means they've got no interest in developing anybody for any other reason. Which, like we said, for a team that uses sevens for development as much as Scotland does, is not great. And even out with on the pitch, if you've seen any of Rona's TikTok when she's been away with the women's sevens of the European Tour, it's a really, really good tool for developing, like we spoke about the guys who went to Argentina in the summer, for getting you used to being on tour and being in a team atmosphere when you're away on tour, and because that is different to anything else. So even if it's not an on-pitch development thing, you're developing people in a team atmosphere, in a tour atmosphere, and that's all just going to completely disappear, because that's not what the GB Sevens are interested in at all.
Yeah, and the coaching development as well has gone out the window, because how many coaches have been through the Scotland Sevens set up and then gone on to do the under-20s, gone on to coach, do coaching at Glasgow and Edinburgh.
Well, John DL did, didn't he?
Yeah. Sorry, I forgot Martin Bell.
The...
Martin Bell's quite right, and I nearly mentioned this before, but Ross Ford has played international sevens. We cannot throw that heritage away. Do it for Ross Ford.
Craig's going to have to watch all the sevens from 100 yards away now.
I can't. He's gone into hiding. I can't find him anywhere.
He's in the original Flinty McStad.
The thing is that the thing is though that this isn't coming from the Olympics either. I think this is the frustrating thing. Is Jim Malland is quoted as saying, once rugby sevens became an Olympic sport, there was an increasingly a requirement from World Rugby that Team GB, as a recognised Olympic entity, should also become part of the sevens landscape to align Olympic qualification through the HSBC World Sevens Series. Then you can't tell me that three of the most powerful unions within World Rugby, because we get apparently we cost Ireland the World Cup with our voting powers that we have.
Yeah,
three of the most powerful unions in World Rugby caved into pressure, immediately held their hands up and went, let's throw away 150 years of history and all the development pathways and everything, and just all right, we'll go for Team GB. Just to have a run, just to have a tilt at the Olympics every 4 years.
Yeah. And do you know what? See, as like petty as this might be, on a personal level, I will find cheering for Team GB very difficult.
Look, I tell you what, if you want a strong argument for independence, there you go.
I was about to say, a union being done for a cash grab. Who'd have thunk it?
Mind you, Mark Bennett did get a silver medal.
He did.
He did.
One of the best players in the damn team. That solo try he scored against
New
was Zealand in the
brilliant,
semi-final with a wee chip over the top. It's I mean, the first time that Bennett really came to my attention was the 2014 Commonwealth Games, because he had wee bits and bobs with Glasgow, like sub appearances.
And
he was better than Stuart Hogg.
I think this is the thing that frustrates me, is we've never done well at the Sevens Rugby World Cup, and the talk is we're going to keep a Sevens team for qualification for the Rugby World Cup every 4 years, Sevens Rugby World Cup. But if up, you might get two players that are going to be part of the Team GB setup when they throw us a couple of breadcrumbs, and then whoever's been on the European circuit, which is probably going to be a load of academy kids.
You might get some Super Six.
Well, exactly. That's it. I mean, although Scotland has got a history of just kind of like throwing a guy on into like an international setup who played Jedburgh Sevens the week before.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
not
but
that's not
there's,
unheard of. Mark
well,
Robertson, I think, used to do that. a
Kyle
bit.
Rowe, he
Mhm.
he played sevens.
Yeah,
I think because he wasn't getting a game.
I think a couple of I definitely know that a couple of the Melrose, but I think Craig Jackson, likes from Melrose, have definitely gone from playing like the Border Seven series to then next week playing in a national sevens tournament because they were somebody short.
Yerofinovic, was it Peter? Is it Rangi Yerofinovic? He's DOR at GHA. His brother Peter, he used to play there. One of the Bickerstaffs at Mar, he got called up to the sevens.
Didn't Vakatawa start in the France Sevens as well?
I think he did. Yeah, that
Yeah.
rings a bell.
Well, Nico and Leone, they started it.
Yeah.
Well,
Nico's played the Melrose Sevens. Nico's won the Melrose Sevens.
Nico, like I think it was the first time I'd ever heard him talk. Like, even though he'd been in Glasgow for a couple of years, like, wow, that's one high pitched voice.
Ali Price won the Melrose Sevens with Saracens.
Oh, did he?
If you Google it, there's I think Duncan Taylor played in the same team. He's got a proper busted haircut.
I think I've seen that haircut before, actually.
Yeah.
I think I know the one you mean.
A busted
Yeah.
haircut to go with
Yeah.
Duncan Taylor's busted body.
I think, I wasn't sure how I felt about it at the time. I went through a whole gamut of emotions to that's a terrible idea to that might work back to, and I'm thinking back on this is an absolutely terrible idea, and the SIU have done nothing but do over the sevens for
It was World Rugby
a
done
number
us
of
over
years.
first by taking Scotland off the. Well, like it used to be around
Yeah.
about my birthday, and it's usually really crap weather around my birthday. And it's Scotland, so they should make it like the last leg on the tour, but they don't. And then they end up giving it to places like Hong Kong and Dubai and all these.
Well, the fact they gave it to Dubai, I think, is
Like
morally there's issues there anyway. So
I mean, you get
maybe
like,
we're better off out of it. Leave them to the royal money. But yeah, it all feels deeply
like you had-
unsatisfying. I think it's supposed to be the fastest growing arm of the sport, apparently. Prior to COVID, it's probably the only thing that will survive the Armageddon that's coming from head injury lawsuits because you
it's
can't get
easier
near.
to
You
squad
can't
that
get.
size in a bubble than 15.
Yeah. Anyway, we've held off long enough talking about the Argentina tour, and we've got 18 minutes left to the main pod to cover it. Do you want? We'll
Game for this one.
probably get into it more in the Patreon podcast, but we should probably just start with kind of like what I'll start with you, Craig. Kind of what's been your kind of one of your big takeaways from this tour? What have I think we got into the second game but we still weren't really sure whether we'd learned anything, and I wonder are we still at a point where we just don't know what we've learned?
I have. I think the only thing we've really learned out of this situation is that Ewan Ashman's bright start when he first came first cap wasn't a fluke, and that Mark Bennett has been sorely missed with his injuries, etc., because he could have probably have had a fair few more caps for Scotland. I can only pick out individual things. I can't turn around and say, right, well, Scotland. I know exactly which way Scotland are playing. I have no idea. I'm worried about our line out. Our line out looks really ropey, and I don't know whether Tooney. I think the biggest take I have to take from it is that Tooney has his own thoughts about where people should play and what style they should play, and it is completely different to everybody else within the rugby community.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think it's. I don't know that we've learned. It felt like the whole tour has been one big experiment, Johnny, and
Yeah.
Maybe that's okay this far out from a World Cup, and we don't have Finn Russell. We didn't have Stuart Hogg on this tour, although might come on to it in the Patreon podcast. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. There's a couple saying, oh, if we'd had Stuart Hogg, it would have been better. It's like, no, he would have absolutely forced everything and wouldn't necessarily been in a better place. But I suppose summer tour is a time to try new things, but I don't. Yeah, we've come away with the same problems, and I don't think we've solved anything.
Yeah. I think one thing that I'm slightly happier about, if I was picking something out, is that our back row depth feels like the real deal this time.
Mm-hmm.
Which is good because it's a position where there's always a lot of injuries, and the fact that even at the moment there's a couple of injuries. Rory Darge didn't get into the second game. Jamie Ritchie's not there, and I think we still had a lot of quite decent options. That would be a bright spot for me. Like I feel like we've got a good number of really good high quality back rows. We didn't really try out a lot in other places, and in fact, we spoke about this after the first two games. I think it was to the detriment of Blair Kinghorn that we didn't try out earlier in the tour a game plan that would have suited him better. That's, to me, that would be the point in having him there, and the point in having him play 3 tests at 10 is that you try a game plan that he could run, and we didn't until the third test. So
yeah, and I suppose that third test, you play a game where Blaine Kinghorn's able to break the line, shape the play a little bit more, do some offloads out the back door, and it all clicked because all of a sudden Scotland's back were playing more of what we would probably identify as an Embra kind of game plan.
But that's even with Sione at 12. I mean, this is one of the things. One of the reasons James Lang said he came up to Edinburgh was so that he could play more at 12 because he was sick of getting shifted around. I think that was actually there's one thing I've DM'd Kev Miller just before we came on. Like, I'm interested to find out what the stats are between like 9-10 combinations and 10-12 combinations. Your sort of midfield playmaking axis. Like, who's got the more successful win rates, sort of between, say, Greg and Finn and Johnson, Price and Finn, Price and Hastings, sort of thing. Because that does seem to be it's where there's so much indecision. Like Johnny was saying, like the back row, I thought Matt Fagerson was terrific on this tour. I think him and Xander. Xander played very well. I mean, we've had some concerns about him, but he seemed to. I think the first test, I mean, let's be honest, the first 3 halves of Test match rugby we played were minging. Really bad stuff. Then seemed to galvanise. Like Scuman's definitely nailed down the number 1 shirt. His scrummaging's improved. We know how good he is as a carrier. Playing it with dodgy. Xander was excellent at 3, like I said. Second row problem. I'd say second row combos and that number 12 jersey. I think there's the 2 biggest problems. But the good takeaways were the back row. Doohan came back into it. Like, he got a lot of pelters after the first test for not working enough, but I reckon he was just told to stay on his wing. If you ask him to come in, he will come in and he will carry hard. And his finish off a nice wee pot from Kinghorn for that first try. I don't think there's many wingers in the world that could have finished from where Doohan did. Coming in off the wing like that and carrying 3 men with him.
Imagine getting to the end of that first test and going, "Oh, why isn't Doohan van der Merwe looking for more carrying?" Like, all Doohan van der Merwe does is carry and drag 4 people with him. Like, if he wasn't coming in and doing the carrying in the first test, it's because he was explicitly told not to. You can't turn around and go, "Oh my god, I can't believe he wasn't coming in looking for carries." Like,
or just because we couldn't string 3 passes together. One of the other problems. I mean, that's like I think if you'd said to us at the start, Argentina, we know they're a good team. I think if you'd said to us at the start of the tour, we'll narrowly lose 2-1, we'd be like, you know what, I'll take that. But seeing the position we were in, like, first test we were minging, second test got really good, second half was excellent. Third test, how have we lost that? And it's the same old picture, really, isn't it? That's the most upsetting thing. Well, it's the most Scottish thing, so it's not upsetting because I'm absolutely used to it. But I love it.
That's it. Like, if we've learned anything, it's that we don't learn, basically.
No, yeah.
Oh,
I
we
think
learn from this. No, you don't. Stop saying it.
But there's the you know, again, I'll go back to the whole thing of why did we take Ali Price?
Mhm.
Why did if we're resting the players that have been Lions, etc. Now, okay, fair enough. Hamish, we've talked about Hamish just getting the chance to come out and be part and lead and be tried as a leader. Well, that's fine, but Ali Price played that game. George Horn's sitting twiddling his thumbs on the bench. He could have really brought that he could have seen the game out with acceleration and perform. And I just don't understand why name him on the bench if you're not going to use him.
This is
Well,
my
say
big.
it's about
This
giving players opportunities and
well,
then
this
not
is
giving
my
them
my
opportunities.
big bugbear about the whole tour, and it's been a massive issue. I think, particularly in the last year with Gregor Townsend, is the way he uses his substitutes. We saw that with the BAM squad in the Six Nations. That he has this. He's like a train conductor, right? He's got his schedule and he's sticking to it, right? He obviously starts every game and goes, right, at 50 minutes, regardless of what's happening, I'm hooking the front row. And then, George isn't getting on no matter what happens unless someone goes down injured. So I'm just, no matter what's happening on the pitch, I've got my plan for my substitutes and I'm sticking to it because that's what it looks like. It's like, I've got my schedule, I've got my game plan, it'll work. And I'm just going to, it's like, in Championship Manager where you can go, let the assistant manager take over for the game. That's essentially the button he presses every single time. It feels like that's the button he presses.
I'm a steady 70-minute subs man. Depends what. But I mean, it's the Ben White. I mean, why?
Yeah.
Ben White played 50 minutes of absolutely fantastic rugby. He's one of the best players on the park in a game that we won handsomely, and then he doesn't get a look in. And as well, I tweeted about how what's the point? This happens to George Horn quite a lot. He gets put on. He's a sub for an important Test match, and then he doesn't see a minute of action. And you can see Ali Price. I mean, right, we might talk about his tweet later.
Yep.
Right now, fair enough. I don't think you shouldn't abuse players. I certainly didn't. I just said he was a wee bit sketchy. It wasn't his best game. He had some good moments. He had some bad moments. I think that's a fair comment. But the man should not have been playing because he's played so much rugby this season. He became a Lions starting 9 completely against the odds.
I think the frustrating thing is, George Horn is a player though that can turn the momentum of a game, and the game swung towards Argentina, and it was swinging towards Argentina, and Scotland still had the scoreboard in their favour, and it would just take sticking somebody like George Horn on the pitch to switch just to switch the momentum back again. The fact
more than once, there's been a Scotland game where Scotland have been 15 points down with 70 minutes gone, and George Horn comes on and we lose by 3 points.
Yeah.
So it's like and he's capable of doing that, and he does it all the time. So give him 25 minutes or half an hour instead of 10 minutes.
Xander played the full 80 as well.
Yeah, I think
so.
I looked at Schumann play as well. Schumann played a fair whack. Oh no, or did he come back?
No, Suz came on at about 65, I think.
65. So Ashman went. Oh, I thought because he replaced Suz and he replaced the two-thirds of the front row at the same time. I didn't realize Ashman had broken his nose and smashed the cheekbone. Apparently,
30 seconds within 30 seconds.
Within 30 seconds, did he?
Yeah, apparently
he still scored a try.
Yeah, 2.
2 tries, yeah. But I think that's for all we've talked about Javan Sebastian on this podcast, stick him on because he carried fight. He was playing, like as you said, Craig, he did okay.
Yeah.
And, expecting some, Xander Ferguson played fine, but the fact the last play of that Argentina got the last try off a scrum and we were going backwards fast in that scrum. And what you can't get away from is that Xander's in that scrum and he's played 80 minutes. And no, I'm not saying that you win that scrum with Javan Sebastian in there, but he's a fresher pair of legs than Xander Ferguson is.
I honestly don't understand the not using. Why put these guys on the bench? They're international quality because you've chosen them to go on an international tour. You use them, and even to the point of we talked about it, potentially being an experimental tour. Sending the guys home that he sent home was crazy, and so as I say, I just think there was 3 or 4 guys there that were tired and didn't really need to be there. And Xander was one of them, although he played incredibly well in the third test. He didn't need to be there.
Yeah. We've got a reasonable question here from Billy, which is Townsend's trying to find a magic formula that doesn't exist. Also, I don't get the focus on a tournament that's every 4 years, where there's an annual one to try and win first.
I don't think that that's Townsend's fault or Scotland's fault, to be perfectly honest. And I get that. Like, I understand that focusing on the Six Nations for Scotland would be a really good idea. But we've kind of been carried on by the wave where every team in the world goes through a 4-year World Cup cycle, and all the press talks about a 4-year World Cup cycle, and the All Blacks hire and fire their coaches at certain points of a 4-year World Cup cycle, and everyone does it. And it's one of these things, like, everyone does it. And I think that's a really good point. If I would, like, Scotland could focus on the Six Nations and less on the World Cup. But I think that the way the tide flows is that everybody focuses on the World Cup cycle and then we just do it.
Yeah, I think the danger is because of the World Cup cycle that after this summer, which we can write off as an experiment, although it didn't feel like there was much experimentation going on. If we have a bad autumn and a bad Six Nations, we're still stuck with the same coach going into the World Cup because of World Cup cycles.
Hey man,
it's kind of too late to turn the bus round.
Kind of like what John was saying, right? I mean, this whole focuses on 4-year World Cup cycles. So if you think of it, I mean, club coaches don't do it, do you? You think maybe it depends how good you are, how bad you are. Maybe if you're a Diddy team, you think, right, 5-year plan. I want to go from being towards the bottom of the league to pushing for European qualification. But I mean, with the player turnarounds in rugby because of injuries and what have you, I mean, really, I think you should be focusing maybe not annually, but every 2 years, sort of like we're going, here's my core 23. Here's a secondary one. And then sort of, get your style of play base first. Don't base it on what's going to happen 4 years' time. Be focusing on your team, how you want to do things, and all that. Right? Because Belgium, after they made, this is football talk. I like my football, but I actually found this really fascinating. They did really well in the 1994 World Cup. I think they got to the semis or quarterfinals.
Yeah, I think they did. Yeah.
Yep. And then they went on a real down path. Like they were terrible for years. It was like Scotland, like at rugby. But then they had this like total mindset change. What they said was, we changed the coaching structure from bottom to front. Started by they had like an academy, and they said, right, the football station has an academy, and then they loan players out to each club. They said, right, who's lined with who? You're an like guy, right? Cool. But we're all going to play this one style of football, and they spread that through the clubs, through the youth systems. And now Belgium, who, let's be honest, are population size and like historically are not great at football. They now have a bunch of world-class players, and they have done for the last 5-10 years. Kevin De Bruyne, Eden Hazard, Vincent Kompany, people like that.
Scotland have done that through club rugby. There is the Scotland way of playing that's spread out through the clubs. I think that the problem for me is, I think, and you touched upon it there, Ian, a little bit, is you look at Wales and you look at England and even maybe France and Ireland a little bit, but they've they've got more of a core of regular players than Scotland do. I think Gregor Townsend tinkers far too much. I don't think Eddie Jones probably tinkers enough, but I couldn't tell you who Scotland's core squad is, and I don't think I get the impression sometimes that Gregor Townsend doesn't know who Scotland's core squad is, because sometimes he'll just throw in Kyle Steyn on the wing just for a laugh. It seems when he's got everybody available. We could name what we think the best Scotland 15 is, but sometimes Gregor Townsend just throw someone in, change things around for the sake of it.
One of the strangest tweets I saw recently was somebody saying, I think when Cummins get picked, he doesn't play that often for Scotland. It's weird to throw him in when he's got Gilchrist and Gray or Skinner. I was like, did you not read the stat that Scott Cummings had started 19 tests in a row, and it was the longest that any player had ever started?
I know part of that's I know part of it's injury, but I just don't feel like we've got a core squad and that means that you don't then have we need a good spine. You need a good spine of a team.
So that's what I was asking Kevin. Like, I want to find out, is a 9-10 combo more important than a 10-12 combo? If that makes any kind of sense, or that sort of first, second receiver, real playmaker axis. Which one is the most successful for Scotland, or which one is style-wise has worked best? Because
I have to say that it's for me, and I'll probably have a chorus of backs shouting at me, but I don't see the 9-10 combo as important as the 10-12, because the 10-12 decides where the ball's going out, whether it's
I was thinking 9's job is just basically, shovel it out, whether that's to a pod or to first receiver as a playmaker. Their game is all about accuracy. It doesn't really as a 9-10.
You have that communication
run
thing.
onto the ball sort of more.
Well, you have that communication thing of your 8, 9, 10, and if the 10's running the game, then your 9 and your 8 are communicating between your 9 is your conduit for what the 10's planning, and he can speed up he or she can speed up the ruck speed. They can speed up the maul. They can speed up bits and pieces if they need to. The problem I have is, it was perfectly obvious to everybody out there, whether it was a negative or a positive, but Blair Kinghorn was playing an Edinburgh style of what he's been playing all year, and Tooney was trying to harness him a different way. And unfortunately, the 12 that was outside him was playing a Scotland way, and whether it's plus or minus to Blair Kinghorn, he was playing an Edinburgh way, which for the first couple of tests, all of a sudden, when Tooney kind of seemed to realise it and started to change it a little bit, all of a sudden Blair Kinghorn's performing well. So it's really difficult. That I just believe that 10-12 is a
I think you're right. I think it also depends, I think, on how your 10 runs the game. Because and this is, I think, we know that Finn Russell and Gregor Townsend have a difficult relationship. I think that as much as in the press as it's improved, the fact he went on the lash after the Italy game would suggest that it's not, the respect isn't entirely two-way. But if you watch Finn Russell play, as a 10, he never stops talking and pointing, and he will tell Ali Price or whoever's at 9 when he wants the ball. He will tell them how many times he wants them to take it, the forwards to take it into contact before he's ready for it to do whatever he wants to do. And this isn't a criticism of Blair Kinghorn, but Blair Kinghorn doesn't seem to be doing that. Now, that could be a developmental thing. It could be a confidence thing that I don't care what my coach tells me I'm going to do. I can see an opportunity here and I'm going to marshal everybody around. But I'm not. The problem Scotland have, I think, is when Finn Russell and to an extent Stuart Hogg aren't there, I don't know who's the person that's walking around the pitch constantly talking and pointing. And you need that guy. You need someone walking around the pitch pointing and telling everybody where to go and directing the play. And I think that's why Ali Price was on this tour.
Because I think he's as close to that as we've got without Finn or
But you
Hogg,
can't. I think I'm not a scrum half, but I don't think it's as easy to do that at 9, because I think at 10 and 15 you can see the wider pitch.
I think at 9 though, like, have you ever heard Craig Laidlaw on the ref mic? Because you can hear him miles away.
Yeah.
He was a proper general.
Yeah, he was a general, but I think a lot of the time but what a 9, you can have the kind of idea of the Le Petit General kind of barking orders and looking both ways, but a lot of the time as a 9, you're staring at a forward's arse and then looking behind you to see who wants the ball. That, you know, that's it. Whereas at 10, you've got that vision. You're standing a little bit further back. You can see a bit more of how the opposition are lining up, and I don't think in the heat of a game a 9's
I think
the ideal place to direct play from.
Where I think the big difference between the two is Finn Russell will change his game plan and will work it away. I think Blair Kinghorn is more of a younger player, and he does as he's told. So he's playing what he's told to play, and then when things are going wrong, right, we'll double down and we play what I'm told to play. Whereas Finn Russell and that's where Finn Russell's the more creative of the two. Yeah.
And I think that's, as a final word, I think that's something that Blair Kinghorn can do. I think in a way it's a shame, although obviously Finn needed the rest, but it's a shame Finn Russell wasn't on the tour, because I know Adam Hastings has talked about a lot of, he's learnt that a lot from Finn Russell. I think it's something that Russell could teach Kinghorn to do. If Kinghorn can kind of add that to his game, then to a certain extent the sky's the limit. If Townsend will finally accept that he needs to find a different way for Scotland to play. Anyway, look, we're an hour and 6 minutes now into the podcast, so this is probably as good a point as any to leave it for the main podcast. We'll say thank you very much to everybody for listening. I will say that for the main podcast, that's probably it for the summer. Patreon podcast will continue through the summer, so if you want to continue in the podcast, pay £3 a month. We'll do little specials. We'll have random chit chat. We'll find things to talk about over the summer. As we get into pre-season, we'll start the main podcast up again. But for the meantime, everybody have a wonderful summer. Patrons, we'll still be here for you, don't worry. But for everybody else, have a wonderful summer, and we will see you when the season starts again. It's goodbye from me and goodbye from me, Ian, Johnny, and Craig.
Bye.
Hello, cheerio.